I mean, I am in total shock. I'm sitting in his office looking at him. He's saying nothing, and I feel like I have a burning ember in the pit of my stomach. And I get up and walk out of his office with a blank stare on my face, and I'm asking myself, what is going on in my world? What am I dealing with here? A divorce? Everything turning upside down in my personal life? Then this happens to me in my professional life?
Welcome to the Game Day Everyday podcast with Coach Bud Boughton. When you make every day a game day, you live a life that matters. Here's Coach Bud.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Game Day Everyday, Leading a Life That Matters. My name is Bud Boughton, and once again we're going to explore how each of us can live our lives so that every day has purpose and meaning and allows each of us to be everything God wants us to be. Because when we learn to live like that, well, it's game day every day. I want to say I've gotten some very nice emails from some of you who have listened to my podcasts, and today I'm going to talk about something that would make what is otherwise just one of those ordinary days in your life into what could be one of the best game days you will ever experience. But first, for some of the newcomers in my podcast, just this whole game day thing, what am I talking about? Well, I'm a former college athlete and coach. I serve as team chaplain now for a college football team. But in my life, game days were the special days. Didn't matter what sport I was playing, what season of the year it was, there was just nothing that seemed more important than a game day. And yet, as I've gotten older, and certainly I'm not a part of athletics the way I once was, I was saying, why don't I have game days now in my everyday life? And the truth is, we can when we make the choice to bring the living presence of Jesus Christ into our life. So that's why I came up with the title, Game Day Every Day, Leading a Life That Matters. In any case, we've had several podcasts so far. I've talked about one very important game day that was life-changing for me. I've talked about identity and how that plays a role in our walk with Jesus Christ. And geez, in that one we talked about a guy named Caroll Spinney, who was actually the guy on Sesame Street who played Big Bird for almost 50 years. And I remember the one quote that he said is, "Playing Big Bird was the most joyous thing of my life." Can you imagine going to work every day and thinking that your job was joyous? I mean, it brought you that much satisfaction and excitement and fulfillment. And yet, that's what he had playing Big Bird. 8-foot 4-inch bird that couldn't fly. But that was his life. And in that same podcast, we talked about a professional hockey player, Jaccob Slavin, who, has made this statement, "I'm not a hockey player who happens to be a Christian. I'm a Christian who happens to be a hockey player." And he says, I know that my hockey career, all that hockey stuff will end someday, but God is forever. So we had a great discussion, so to speak, around identity. And when we think of people who truly have a sense of purpose like that, I don't think any of us can, if we're familiar with it, can really not go to Jeremiah 29:11, which says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for your welfare, not for disaster, to help you have a future and a hope." I mean, what powerful words to take from the book of Jeremiah that lets each of us know there's a plan, that the Lord has a plan for us. And following that, in one of our podcasts, we talk about how time is the great equalizer, that really it doesn't matter about your birthright, your color, creed, no matter who you are, how much money you have, anything else. We all have the same amount of time every day. Really, how much time any of us have to do what we do every day is the same. It's 86,400 seconds. That's what we got. And you know what? We give that time purpose when we go to Scripture. And in Psalm 118, it makes it very clear, verse 24, "This is the day the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." Yeah, that day, it's a gift. This is the day the Lord hath made. This one day, that's all we have when we get up in the morning. So let's rejoice and be glad in it. And in that podcast, I remember I asked you to think about, maybe at the end of the day, saying, how did I live my life today? We need to ask ourselves that question. But you know what? After the podcast, I said, why ask at the end of the day? Maybe we should start our day looking in the mirror and saying, how am I going to live my life today? How am I going to go out the door and be intentional about practicing my faith, practicing kindness, practicing just love and compassion with everybody I come in contact with? So in any case, those are some of the backdrop of some of the other podcasts that we've had. And today, I knew what I wanted to talk to you about. I really want to tell you a story that ties very closely to a very important biblical principle. But earlier in the week, a good friend of mine, who I was on a Zoom call with several other people, made this statement. And I have to give the credit to David Sharon, a very good friend of mine, who said, "We often underestimate the beauty of struggle." And I thought, what? That's a great quote. We often underestimate the beauty of struggle, because when we go through hardships, when we go through tough times, that's when we draw closer to God. That's when we look at our faith and understand how very, very important it is. And the story I'm going to tell you is certainly about a time when I was struggling in my life. So let me begin story time, and we'll go from there. The year is 1989. I hope you were alive. You may have been, you may not have been, but it's 1989, and let me tell you, folks, I am living the dream. I'm a younger man. I'm 38 years old at the time, living in a beautiful home in Orlando, Florida. I'm married. I have two wonderful sons. They're in elementary school. We're active in our church. The boys and everything, we're involved in youth programs at the school. The boys are playing Little League sports. We pay our bills on time. We take wonderful vacations. Like I say, we are living the dream, or so I thought. And then my world, or should I say our world, kind of blew up. One night out of the blue, my wife tells me she wants a divorce. I had no idea. Something could be going on in the background, or I wasn't paying attention to her the way I needed to. I couldn't believe it. But long story short, her mind was made up and she wanted out of the marriage. And I will tell you, I was devastated. I never saw it coming. Quite honestly, I was a bit of a train wreck at first. And even throughout the period as we went through the divorce, our two sons struggled. As you might expect, our family, as I once knew it, was over. It was done. It was gone. Now, with all that said, fortunately for me, at the time, I have a great job. I have a very supportive boss who I report to, a man who I respect and genuinely like, and who has befriended me as I'm going through what is really the worst disaster of my adult life, this divorce. So, I struggled through that whole year of 1989, but as a sales guy, I closed some critical pieces of business for the company, and I just feel like, okay, let's get to the new year. I want a fresh start. And here we are into 1990. I'm ready for that fresh start. And my first day back in the office, my boss calls me to his office and tells me that I've been distracted. I'm not as focused as I needed to be on my work, and as a result, he needs to let me go. And he gives me an ultimatum. He said, here, there's a letter of resignation. You sign this, I'll pay you for 60 days with full benefits. Otherwise, if you don't sign the letter of resignation, I've got to fire you today with no severance benefits whatsoever. I am in total shock. I'm sitting in his office looking at him. He's saying nothing, and I feel like I have a burning ember in the pit of my stomach. And I get up and walk out of his office with a blank stare on my face, and I'm asking myself, what is going on in my world? What am I dealing with here? A divorce, everything turning upside down in my personal life, then this happens to me in my professional life. I called an attorney. I asked him, what should I do? And he says, you don't have a choice. You got to sign that letter of resignation, protect yourself financially. But once that's done, we'll deal with the situation after the fact. But here's what was most painful about that ordeal. I liked my boss. I loved working for my boss. He was the guy who hired me into that sales role with that company. He was a guy I respected and trusted. He was a guy who befriended me throughout what was a very difficult 9-month period of my life. At this point, my divorce is finalized. The house we'd been living in was gone. My sons are living in a condo with their mom, who is now my ex-wife, and I'm living by myself in an apartment. And essentially, I have lost my identity as a husband, a father, protector, provider. I'm feeling like a loser in pretty much every aspect of my life, but I still had my job, or so I thought. And now, on top of it all, I'm losing my job, and I'm being fired by a guy who I like very much. No warning, no evaluation period, no previous negative performance reviews, but I am being fired. And so it was. I signed the letter of resignation and I was out the door. Now, what I've not mentioned at this point in the story is the company I was working for was a wholly owned subsidiary of a major multi-billion-dollar financial institution. And yes, our human resource policies were the equivalent of what they had at the financial institution. So, that being the case, I said, well, I think I can try to recover a financial settlement that's better than 60 days of severance. So I went on a major letter-writing campaign to senior executives of the parent company. And in doing so, I brought a lot of heat and unwanted scrutiny on my former boss. And through a circle of mutual friends in our industry, it became known to me that my ex-boss was extremely upset with me. In fact, one of our mutual friends warned me to keep an eye out if I ever found myself in a dark parking lot at night. It had gotten that ugly. He was very upset with me. And needless to say, my ex-boss and I avoided any contact whatsoever for almost a year. And then there was a strange twist of fate. It was a Saturday, and the headline on the 6 o'clock evening news was, "Skydiver killed at DeLand drop zone. Details at 6 p.m. Now, my ex-boss was an avid skydiver, and he often did his skydiving out of the drop zone up in DeLand, Florida. So my thoughts immediately went to him. I'm wondering, oh my gosh, could this be my ex-boss? Now, fortunately, it was not. But even though it was not him, I was sure he probably knew who the individual was who had lost his life. At that moment, there was a major sense of relief for me, knowing that the victim was not my ex-boss. But then it hit me. Out of the blue, I don't know how it happened, why it happened, but I had an overwhelming sense of sadness. I thought about my ex-boss, and I thought about him grieving for his friend who had met this untimely death. And yes, I genuinely felt sad for my ex-boss. For all that had happened, for all that my ex-boss and I had been through, I suddenly realized I missed not coming clean with him throughout this whole process, so that maybe, just maybe, we could have still remained friends even if he had to let me go. And yes, while I felt in some ways I had been treated unfairly when he let me go, he had been right. He had been right about the very reason he was letting me go. Because during my divorce, he was right. I had been distracted at work. I had periods when I wasn't as focused as I needed to be. And maybe those things didn't justify him firing me, but I clearly had not been at my best in that time frame. And this, my friend, is where the power of prayer and the biblical principle of forgiveness saved me. I needed to go to God and ask for His guidance and the strength to go forward with a forgiving heart. And I prayed for that strength, and then I began to think of some of the verses of Scripture on the subject of forgiveness. And, it began right with the verse from the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. That comes from Matthew chapter 6, verse 12. But right there in the prayer that Jesus taught us how to pray, He talks about forgiveness. And then there's the famous verses, if we look further in the book of Matthew, chapter 18, verses 21 and 22, where Peter asked the Lord how often should he forgive his brother who sins against him. And remember, he says, 7 times? Maybe 7 times I should forgive him? The Lord responds, I say not to thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. And you know what? This is the crazy part. I had been so bitter about being fired that I was blinded to the fact that I had already experienced the healing power of the gift of forgiveness earlier in the year. On my birthday in 1989, June 15th, 1989, I open up my daily meditation from the Daily Word, and the theme was about forgiveness. And I remember at the time praying to God to soften my heart and forgive me for the many sins and mistakes I had made in my life, to help me forgive my ex-wife for the pain she had brought into my life, but also for anything I had done to bring on the divorce in the first place. And I remember reading the second line of the meditation over and over, and I quote, forgiveness releases all animosity and brings an open and clear mind to whatever I am experiencing now. And in that moment, it became clear to me. I needed to reach out to my ex-boss. I needed to apologize to him for all the grief I had caused him at work with my letter writing campaign, and I needed to ask him for his forgiveness. And so, right then, on that Saturday night, I remember I pick up my phone and I call my ex-boss's home number. And he does not answer the phone, but his answering machine greets me, and I leave this message, so to speak. Hey, this is Bud. I know you probably weren't expecting to hear from me, but I saw the news about the accident up in DeLand, and while I was relieved it wasn't you, I want to express my condolences, because my guess is you knew the guy, and I'm very sorry for your loss. Anyway, that said, I want you also to know I appreciate everything you did for me when I worked for you, and I hope you will forgive me for any of my actions and or behaviors that have caused you issues at work. Please forgive me. I hope you are well, and hey, wishing you all the best. And I hang up. It was done. God had helped me break through a wall I never could have broken through on my own. It was a wall I had built out of my anger and disappointment and frustration. And now the wall was no more. After that message that I left, I remember I immediately headed out the door, and I took what was a very cleansing 5-mile run in the early evening Florida sunshine. And then, when I returned home, there was a very short message on my answering machine. It was from my ex-boss, and it simply was this: I got your message. I need to have you meet me for lunch on Monday at 11:45 a.m. at the Fridays restaurant on Colonial Avenue. Don't be late. End of message. I was stunned. Now, first of all, this wasn't a request for lunch. It was an order. Yep, this was who my ex-boss was. He was direct, to the point. He was tough, but he was always fair. But he was never afraid to tell you what he expected or wanted. And I gotta say, for some strange reason, those were some of the qualities I actually admired about him. And like I said, I loved working for him. And yes, even though I had no idea what I would be walking into on Monday, I was going to be there at 11:45 because I knew that God would be with me in that moment. Knowing that I had prayed about the situation and that I had asked for forgiveness, it had taken the burden I'd been carrying off my back. Even if my ex-boss was going to unload on me in public, I wasn't concerned. I was comfortably prepared for whatever the outcome might be because I had prayed about it. I had gone to God for his direction and guidance, and I truly believed that God knew my heart was now in the right place. So, come Monday, I head to the restaurant. As I arrive, my ex-boss was already there. As we met, I extended my hand to shake his, but he had already turned to the waitress who was leading the way to our table in a far corner of the restaurant. Kind of an awkward beginning, no handshake, no smile, no personal greeting. So a bit of an awkward beginning to our meeting. Once seated, there was no small talk. In fact, he wasn't smiling. He was all business as usual. And he looked at me with his piercing blue eyes, and he said to me, "Okay, I got your message on my phone, and I accept your apology. And let me add, my decision to let you go when I did, and the way I did it, was probably not one of the better management decisions I've made in my career. So I wanted to say that to your face, and now do you have anything else you want to say to me?" Well, that was a pretty brief message from my boss. Rather terse, direct, to the point. I'm not sure what I was really expecting, but I wasn't totally sure how to respond. But I told him again that I was sorry for the issues I might have caused him at work, and I just said I was sorry that our relationship had ended the way it had. There was not much to say. With that, he says, "Okay, let's have some lunch, and I'm going to make you a job offer while we are here, and we are not leaving the restaurant until you have accepted the new position I have created for you." What? Are you kidding me? I mean, I was in total shock. Had I heard him correctly? He was offering me a position with the company, and not my former job, but a position he had specifically created for me? Unbelievable. My ex-boss right there in that Friday's restaurant told me that the company was creating a new division and he wanted me to be the national sales manager for this new division. I would be reporting to him in this new position, but the financial package was well beyond what I had previously been earning with the company. And yes, it was one of the best game days of my life, and I will never forget it. But you know what? Why was it truly one of the best game days of my life? Because the job offer was nice. The financial package was great. But I'll tell you why. Because even though I never expected this kind of outcome that came from the meeting with my ex-boss, I knew when I left my apartment that morning, headed to the restaurant, God was with me. I wasn't alone going to that lunch. God had already given me the strength to forgive my ex-boss and forgive myself for my own transgressions and mistakes I had made. What more could I do? What more could I have done than go to God for that forgiveness? And that is a question each of us needs to ask ourselves every day. Practicing forgiveness can turn any day into one of your very best game days. When was the last time, let me ask, when was the last time you actually went to a friend, a sibling, a loved one, and apologized for something you may have said or done that might have hurt their feelings? Let's face it, I mean, we all have made those mistakes. But is there someone in your life you need to forgive, or someone you need to ask for their forgiveness? I know a lot of people say, well, time heals all wounds. But is that the truth? Does it really? And if it does, is that how God wants us to go through life, just waiting for time to hopefully heal us. Maybe you say, well, yeah, I'd like to forgive that person, but that's an awkward situation. I don't have the strength. I don't have the courage to face up to that person and apologize or to ask for their forgiveness. Well, guess what? Pray about it. Go to God in prayer and ask Him to give you that strength and courage. You know, each and every one of us has someone we need to forgive for what they have done to us, or maybe someone we need to go to in order to ask for their forgiveness. And when we do this, when we make the effort to forgive or ask for forgiveness, we are showing that we love our neighbors just as we love ourselves. And regardless of the outcome, when we make the effort to forgive and or ask for forgiveness, God knows that our heart is in the right place. What could be better than that? You know, it's interesting. I told you about a quote earlier in the week. We often underestimate the beauty of struggle. It was so true in that point in my life when I was going through both my divorce and then losing my job and really my total identity. What a difficult time, what a difficult struggle it was. And yet there was beauty in all of it, especially with the outcome, especially with what God did for me and for my ex-boss in bringing us back together. You know, I want to close out this podcast sharing with you some words from my first book. My first book was called The Missing Piece, Our Search for Security in an Insecure World. And in this book, I dedicated an entire chapter to the subject of forgiveness, and I called the chapter Practicing Forgiveness in Our Daily Lives, because I truly believe we need to do that, not just when there's major events. We need to practice forgiveness in our daily lives. And I read from the book, it suddenly dawned on me that if I truly did believe in a God who can forgive me for all of the sins and wrongdoings that I commit in my life, and I certainly have committed them, shouldn't I try to practice the same model of forgiveness? Even if it were 1/zillionth, an infinitesimal, immeasurable amount of forgiveness compared to what God offers me, shouldn't I be able to get past my own selfish interests and forgive myself and all those who have hurt me in some way? I wrote those words 30 years ago, and they're as relevant to me now as they were then. I'm going to ask you, you know, in your life, whatever you do professionally or in business, in athletics, in our personal lives, in our relationships, be it with our spouses, be it with our children, be it with our siblings, be it with friends or business colleagues, in this life, we are living in the here and now. I am telling you, it is my belief that the ability to practice forgiveness may be the greatest gift God gives us in this life. You aren't sure? Well, just try it and see if in fact you can't change an ordinary day you are living into one of the best game days you have ever lived just by practicing the simple act of forgiveness. That brings me to the end of another podcast. I want to thank you very much for joining me. If you'd like to learn more about any of my books or services I can provide, please visit my website at www.budboughton.com. Until next time, remember that when you make the choice to bring the living presence of Jesus Christ into your everyday life, you will be on your way to leading a life that matters. And that, my friend, makes it a game day every day.
Thanks for listening to Game Day Every Day with Coach Bud Boughton. Connect for more at budboughton.com. Be sure to subscribe to the Shine.fm podcast channel for new episodes.